Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Christine Gregory, and I am a first-year student at the Tuck School. On behalf of the Food and Agriculture Club, as well as the Center for Private Equity and Venture Capital, I'd like to welcome you to our panel, which is the Fireside Chat, Financing the Future with Kelly Belcher. He serves as the Managing Director and Head of Energy and Resources Innovation at Silicon Valley Bank. I'd also like to go ahead and introduce our moderator of the panel, who is Jim Fuel, the Executive Director for the Center for Private Equity and Venture Capital at Tuck. He also serves as a venture partner at Crosslink Capital. So from here, I'll turn it over to Jim, who will lead our discussion on financing the future of ag tech. Thanks very much, Jim.
Great, thanks everybody. Thanks for joining us today. We have 635 people registered for the conference so far, which is fantastic. And a lot of great programming that kicked off this morning will continue for the next 3 days. So we're pretty excited about the conference, the growth, and the content from when we started 2 years ago doing this. I'm super excited to have Kelly Belcher with me from Silicon Valley Bank. For those of you who don't know, I moved out to Silicon Valley in 1979. So I've kind of watched the growth of the Valley over the last 40 plus years. And Silicon Valley Bank at the time was a tiny little startup bank serving startups in Silicon Valley. And I've kind of watched the bank grow over time to not just serving Silicon Valley, but serving companies all over the country and all over the world, totally focused on emerging growth technology, life sciences, and the innovation economy. So it's really exciting to have Silicon Valley Bank here with us, because what I didn't know was their investment in building their presence in the ag tech and sustainability sectors. So Kelly Belcher, and by the way, I want to thank Silicon Valley Bank for being one of our sponsors and supporting what we're doing here and making all of this possible. Kelly is a managing director at Silicon Valley Bank. He's responsible for setting the strategic vision for the energy and resources innovation team at Silicon Valley Bank, cultivating technology ecosystems around energy, sustainability, and ag tech for SVB's offices in Houston, Boston, and New York. So that's the brief intro, but what I want to do is ask Kelly to start, and just because we do have a lot of students on, and we have a lot of younger entrepreneurs on, and to talk about your career path, how you got to Silicon Valley, what prepared you to get to Silicon Valley Bank, and then your role at Silicon Valley Bank as it's evolved into your current role.
Sure. Yeah, I the best way to describe it is I'm a long way from home. So I grew up in West Texas in a very, very small town in an oil and gas family who also owned a family ranch as well. So I didn't know then that it was actually preparing me for a little bit about what I'm doing now, which is, cultivating the ecosystem around natural resources. So, learn to respect farming, ranching, learn to respect Mother Nature and the finite amount of natural resources that we have. So I ended up going to school at Texas Tech. I did undergrad and grad school there. Spent some time consulting on the East Coast, my first job out of school. Made it back to Texas in an investment banking capacity, and that's when I sort of dove into the energy sector and did that for a little bit. Went through 2 cycles of that. Decided to switch over into the operating side of the house and actually build an E&P company. So we took some private equity money and built that out. Along the way, we started using more technology, specifically in upstream energy, and that's when I met a banker at Silicon Valley Bank who was in Austin at the time. After a lot of conversations and maybe 1 or 2 too many drinks, he convinced me to take a look at SVB and help him build out an energy practice at the bank. So what SVB had done over the years, going back all the way to your time, Jim, we had financed a lot of different things: movies, churches. And then got into semiconductors and then software, hardware. But what we hadn't done was traditional energy and build out our clean tech practice. So the clean tech practice evolved over the last few years, but essentially got started in earnest about 12 years ago. And so over time, we figured out that, hey, there's multiple ways to support energy companies. And so my role specifically was to come in, develop an ecosystem around energy, and bolt that onto our clean tech practice. But it didn't take very long to figure out that that when you start to peel back the onion, you learn that there are a lot of things that fit into the circular economy concept. And one of the major things is food and agriculture technology. So about 2 years after we began this endeavor, we quickly started to bolt on this food and ag tech vertical at SVB. So naturally folded into the ERI team, which is focused on providing financing and sector expertise to anything touching natural resources. So I'm happy to say that after 5.5 years, we're hitting the ground running. We're supporting this vertical on a global basis. My team is sort of spread out across the country in the Bay Area, Colorado, Texas, Boston, and New York. And so, yeah, it's fairly new in concept to as it pertains to technology, but it's a very, very old industry, one of the first industries when you think about food, both production and distribution. So I'm very, very happy to be here and would love to talk more about the technology side of it.
Great, awesome. It's by the way, just a little bit fun for Kelly's background. He didn't tell you what town in Texas, West Texas, he's from, just Permian, Texas, and Odessa, Texas, which had the Permian Panthers in Odessa,
Yep.
Texas. And for those of you who watch the movie Friday Night Lights or the TV show Friday Night Lights, that was the Permian Panthers. And they happened to be a school that my high school, I was from El Paso, Texas, would play in the playoffs about every other year. So I kind of lived the fear of going to Odessa and playing in front of the Panther faithful.
Yeah, there you go.
That was a fun connection that we made last week.
That's right.
Which I didn't realize. So it's interesting that you've evolved this practice from energy and natural resources and to sustainability and ag tech. I think a lot of people kind of separate energy from what's going on in ag. And one of the themes that's come across in our conference last year, 2 years ago, and will continue to come across here, woven throughout, is this tight connection. Just because of the energy consumption and the emissions and everything else in the ag sector. And it's great to see SVB sort of linking all of this and seeing this ahead, because I kind of think of banking practices at a lot of banks as looking at energy in a silo and not looking at energy as kind of being this thing that intersects all these other areas, including ag. So tell us a little bit about how this started at the senior levels of Silicon Valley Bank. What were they trying to drive with this as you were trying to build this out?
Yeah, so the evolution of the ERI practice started with financing solar projects, because solar technology was fully developed. There hasn't been a whole lot of innovation there over the last decade or so. So it was easy to kind of step into that and finance some of those solar projects, which turned into wind as well. Once you sort of do enough repetitions in that space, you figure out that that there's a bigger village. So energy is a very, very broad concept. Everything we do takes energy in some form, whether it's electricity or other if you're using batteries or storage. So we took the clean tech practice and we said, okay, traditional energy plus clean tech would serve this global concept of how we distribute energy more effectively to the consumer. And that was when we stepped in and we said, okay, well, oil and gas companies, very slow to evolve, very, very harmful to the environment, and haven't really done anything to kind of take that step to get into renewable, sustainable practices. But there's a lot of technology that could actually support that concept. So we said, we'll support those technology companies. We'll finance them. We'll help them grow and scale so that when they get big enough and when it's easy to adapt by these oil and gas producers, they can really use the technology to actually create a revenue stream. And so when you think about creating efficiencies, it's a natural resource that in theory could dry up. So why not be more efficient with it? And at the same time, maybe capture some of the bad stuff that's being emitted into the atmosphere. When we dove into that and started to understand, well, okay, if carbon emissions are this, what all contributes to that? Well, energy is one piece of it, but then food and agriculture is another piece. And so we said, okay, well, if we're already working with technology companies that can do sequestration in oil and gas, well, why not apply that same principle into food and ag as well? And so it was kind of fortuitous because at the same time we were doing our homework on this, a lot of these technology companies were getting started. And so you have methane detection businesses that have kind of come out of nowhere, and they can scale across the whole platform of energy and also across agriculture as well. So one of the things that energy and ag has in common is real estate. So big blocks of real estate and land. And so when you look at drones, robotics, methane detection systems, those kind of can be applied at anywhere across the broad spectrum of energy. So it made sense to kind of lump it together. And then another part of the pattern was that a lot of the equity investments that were being made into energy were starting to be made in the agriculture space as well. Because once the investors did their homework and figured out that it was scalable across, then they started to deploy equity dollars into these technology companies that we were already sort of servicing from the banking side.
So, when I look at most commercial banks, they have loan officers and they have career commercial bankers, and the core product is a variety of lending products. And obviously you have working capital loans, accounts receivable, inventory loans, unsecured kind of credit on top of that. You have venture debt for young companies. But if you look beyond the credit products, and you don't come from a banking background, right? So, and I have a friend who's at Tuck 07 who does the same thing for Silicon Valley Bank and enterprise software. Mm-hmm. He doesn't have a classic banking background either. And so you're bringing a different background. So tell us more about, okay, you've got these core banking products and services. What else do you do for companies? How do you get involved? How do you help them? When do you start getting involved? And then how do you grow with them, and how do you continue to provide services beyond core banking services to these companies?
Sure, it's a good question. So much of the banking piece of it is federally regulated. So candidly, the way we operate accounts and foreign exchange and wire transfers and all of the things that you would typically apply to banking, all of that stuff is regulated. So we're not a whole lot different than other institutions. Sure. Our differentiation is in the part of the life cycle where we get excited about working with a company. We will bank people when they're pre-revenue. We will bank people when they're an idea and they take their first grant money or check, whatever, however they're funded for the first time. And we'll open accounts for that entrepreneur, and we do so at a very nominal cost, and most of the time free for up to 30 years. The second part of your question is why are we, how does a kind of a non-bank background get involved and sort of become a commercial banker at SVB? And I think there's an intellectual curiosity that all of our banking teams have, where it's very much locating the problem and creating a solution for that problem. So specific to ERI and specific to food and ag tech, what we noticed was the businesses can take on growth capital in the form of equity. We can provide venture debt, which is an extension of growth capital. But there wasn't anybody in the banking industry that was providing these hardware as a service type of loans. What I mean by that is food and agriculture companies and energy companies can be very, very asset intensive. So it's not like a software company where you build the software out and then it's customer acquisition, which helps you scale your revenue. The businesses we look at need a massive amount of CapEx, not just OpEx, they need CapEx as well. So the OpEx gets covered most of the time by equity and venture debt. The CapEx was a big hole. And so either the entrepreneur would have to dilute themselves, take on more equity, or they would just flat out not succeed, which is a problem when there's a good technology and you can't get to scale. So we said, okay, why don't we create products around this concept of funding CapEx for these asset intensive businesses? So if you think about like a strawberry picking robot. That business needs probably hundreds of robots. So if Walmart calls them and says, hey, we love your technology, we want 1,000 of these things, the entrepreneur is like, oh crap, like how do I do that? All I have is this first equity check, which is paying salaries for my employees. Then we can come in and say, okay, let us see the contract from Walmart. Let us fund those 1,000 robots. We'll kind of pre-fund those, you manufacture them. And once those revenues start coming in, that's when that debt starts to get serviced. So it's kind of a call option for the entrepreneur. So I think that it's a long-winded way of saying or answering your question is that the bankers and the people that work on my team are very, very much seeking out the problem first and then finding a solution for it, creating a solution. So we were able to bend the ear of the executive management team. We say, here's what we're seeing in the market. And then we create buckets to go out and fund those types of problems.
And how do you bring the Silicon Valley Bank network to bear on your young companies to help them grow and make connections, and whether it's BD, capital introductions, whatever? Tell us a little more about the network and the benefit of the network that differentiates the bank from others.
Yeah. The network effect is a real thing, and when you study it and when you invest in network effect, you don't realize it until you're actually working for a business that utilizes the network effect. And so at SVB, certainly we do. So two ways. One, when an entrepreneur comes to us and they say, hey, here's my forecast, here's the milestones I have to hit, and here's the hurdles that I have to jump to get there. We can sit down with them and say, okay, well, your personality type, the type of capital you need, the strategic or professional type of equity that you need. Here's a Rolodex of VCs, private equity groups that we know who are active in the space and who might have an interest in helping you. And so that's a value that we, in my investment banking days, we would charge for that. We don't do that at SVB. We don't provide any advisory services. So it's just something we do out of karma to develop these ecosystems. So number one, capital introductions. Number two would be customer acquisition. So the one thing that we have the benefit of being bankers at SVB is seeing a lot of repetitions in businesses going to the market and acquiring customers. So we've seen what's worked and what's not perhaps worked so well. So if you think about selling into the ag business, we know the strategic businesses that are actually out there with the large customer bases that an entrepreneur may want to get involved with. And so we can help make those introductions and actually secure those sort of first revenue dollars in from those customers. So I think we do that really well, and that's actually where I spend the majority of my time, less so on the banking, more so on the relationship side, which is I find that to be kind of more meaningful and feels like you're actually actually really helping somebody and helping them develop their technology. So I think that's where SVB stands out perhaps against other financial institutions. So we're more vested in helping the entrepreneur grow and scale their business versus just leading in with a banking product.
So talk a little bit, now that you've been focusing on food and ag as part of this practice for a few years, tell us about your view of what are your predictions of where this goes for food and ag and the interplay between energy and food and ag over the next 10 years.
Yeah. I think there's a tremendous tailwind right now, and we sort of have the pieces put together through our government to support this concept of creating a more sustainable, more renewable energy ecosystem, and that includes food and agriculture. So one of the things that we're able to do now, and the dollars are being funded both federally and privately, is in corporate. So corporate, there's kind of three legs to the stool. There's the government funding, the corporate funding, and the consumers. What they're interested in. So my prediction is that we will start to think harder about how we sequester carbon, both food and ag and with energy. And we'll start thinking harder about what the U.S. target is for emissions reduction and temperature regulation. And part of the Paris Agreement will help with that. And so it's good that we're sort of getting back involved with that. I think from a technology standpoint, the things that are interesting are e-commerce. So, connecting, and I'll go back a step. So farming and agriculture it's a very, very old industry, and it hasn't really adapted and changed much over the last 200 years. So one of the things we need to do is be better about connecting the businesses inside that ecosystem. And so some of the ways you do that are with e-commerce and this concept of AI and IoT, which food and ag has very, very little of those types of technologies. And so the exciting thing that I predict would be that we have this connected system of farming and agriculture. And then we're able to create an e-commerce platform to take the food from production to distribution. And I think and it's even more exciting when you think about doing that to underserved economies, which is the largest problem now. So several angles there. That's a lot, but I think GHG emission control and then how we distribute food to underserved economies are two of the things that we're hyper focused on right now.
And so I'm going to throw a wild card at you we didn't talk about, but that is, so a lot of this is on the production side. What about on the other side for consumers and this big move towards consumer and health and everything else that's tied to ag and food products? How is Silicon Valley Bank looking at that? What are the teams? What are the resources there on that side of the business? Is that more a consumer team or a health team, or how does that all work?
Yeah, good question. It depends if there is science behind the particular food. So let's for example talk about a plant-based seafood, for instance. If there's science behind that plant-based seafood and there's intellectual property, then it would fall to the energy and resources team. If it's more of a novel type of business, then our consumer team would run with it. The benefit that we have at SVB is our teams are pretty well interconnected. So if we decide to begin a relationship with a plant-based seafood company, and we help them grow, and then they scale to a point where it's fully commercial, and now it's ready to hit the whole food shelves, and they're gonna it's a rocket ship. We would involve our consumer team to kind of help with that, because they know the rapid scale environment and who the contacts are and who the potential next wave of investors might be to come in and support that business. But I think to dig in deeper on that question, I think the one of the things we're doing to support the idea of consumerism with food is we first need to think about what it costs to actually eat or purchase and eat alternative types of food. So it's much cheaper to not worry about organics and not worry about alternative sources of protein. I think that's going to change. So the things that we're investing time in and actually financing are indoor farms and these alternative sources of protein and dairy and different things like that. So I think we're trying to make it cheaper for the consumer to if they do want to have alternative types of food in their diet to actually go and buy and utilize those. So, and one of the ways we do that is by helping indoor farms grow and scale, and then helping these alternative protein companies.
So I got a question from a budding ag tech venture capitalist. Mm-hmm. I humbly disagree that ag hasn't changed in the past 200 years. We've got autonomous tractors, highly connected farms, irrigation, weather, variable rate technology, drone applications that cover crop seeds, and very sophisticated planting management and harvesting mechanisms of U.S. farms are pretty mad technology. I don't know if that's a question or a statement. But I will note before I turn it over to Kelly that he did mention autonomous vehicles. He did mention, robotics. He did mention, sustainability around water and, energy and other things connected to ag. So I think we'll give him some credit there, but maybe you can respond to that.
Yeah, I think my point was that not a lot had changed until we started looking heavily at this and investing time in this. So I do agree. We are looking at robotics companies. We're looking at autonomous tractors. We're looking at AI and IoT. We're actively involved with those types of business. I think we're still in early innings And I don't think that any of that technology is fully developed and fully deployed. So I view this as kind of, when I think about where we were with energy and it took 5 years to kind of get up to speed, I think that's kind of where we're at now. So a lot of this technology is in early form. So yeah, but prior to, call it 5 to 10 years ago, we didn't have a lot of this technology. So it's just been over the last decade where it's starting to develop.
So when is too early to work with Silicon Valley Bank? This question that we just had came from somebody who worked in a food and ag incubating companies. Do you get involved with the incubators and that early or after they spin out of the incubators?
Yeah, we do. So we have a startup banking team that actually works with pre-Series A. So kind of when you think about taking your first check and raising your seed round, that team would handle that. If it's a rapid scale scenario where we know the business is going to take that check, scale very quickly, then you come straight to our team. But the answer to the question is really never too early, and it's really never too late. So we fund the full life cycle of a company. So it could be, I've met with entrepreneurs in their garage and looked at their technologies, and we also bank corporate type borrowers that are publicly traded. So there's really no part of the life cycle that we don't work with. So if you're an entrepreneur just getting started, we're happy to bank the company.
Right. Great, terrific. And audience, we got one question from the audience. We need some more populated here. We've only got a couple of minutes left, but so you were actually an operator and joined a quasi startup company on the E&P side. I'm not encouraging you leave Silicon Valley Bank. We need you there, helping all the companies in the ecosystem. But what are the areas that you personally think are, if you were to join a company, tell me what you would be most excited about in terms of the next 5 to 10 years and having a monster run?
Yeah, I think the moonshot problems are interesting. So if someone were to tackle climate change, that would be interesting. Like the big problems, not the crazy problems like Elon Musk would go out and look for, but the moonshot problems where there's a solution. It's a long ways away, and there's a lot of capital that needs to be deployed. The exciting things to me right now specifically are infrastructure. We have all this great technology, but there's not a whole lot of infrastructure in place to actually deploy it across. So my interest outside of SVB are partnering up on a personal level with people that are building infrastructure for energy. And that could be food distribution systems. It could be hydrogen distribution, and upgrading the grid. Those are my personal interest. And if I weren't at SVB, that's probably what I would be spending time on.
Right, excellent. Well, it's been a great session. I do want to point out that we have a lot of entrepreneurs on, and we have entrepreneurs from all over the world. So what about outside the United States? How does Silicon Valley Bank play outside the United States?
Yeah. So we have a banking charter in Canada. So our friends to the north, we have a banking team in the UK, a banking team in Germany, a banking team in Israel, and a banking charter in China. So we have most of the globe covered. But I will say in our portfolio, there's companies from Australia, there's companies from South America. It's all over the world. Anywhere there's innovation and an ecosystem, we will put a group of people there to help grow it.
Great, terrific. And we've got time for one question. It's going to be a quick answer. Is SVB making investments in green hydrogen and ammonia?
Yes, we are. So green hydrogen, I love it. It's a space we're spending a lot of time on. We have a team fully dedicated to exploring it. We are working with 3 and potentially 4 companies that are scaling it. So the hard part about green hydrogen is scale. That people have figured out the equation how to create it, and now the problem is to scale it. And so that's what we're working on.
Great. So really appreciate having Kelly here. If you're an entrepreneur, keep SVB in mind. If you're a venture capitalist, they have a fund of funds. They also have a phenomenal service providing services to venture funds and managing their fund at the fund level. Our funds run on Silicon Valley Bank in the background, and they help manage all of that, the financial and funding process for us. So a lot of great services for all of our audience here. Really want to thank Kelly for being here.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. And look, I'm an open book, easy to find. So if you have more questions, please reach out. I'm happy to chat. So, thank you for having me.
Perfect. Thanks.